Welcome to another episode of Moon Monkey with me, Andrew, and Matt. On this episode, we talk about Downsizing, directed by Alexander Payne.
So Downsizing, a really interesting premise that I think was kind of quite intriguing from the trailers. Basically, Matt Damon stars as a man who's in a sort of struggling to get on the property ladder or struggling to buy a bigger house because obviously economic pressures being what they are. But fortunately, there's a new technology being invented, which means that people can be shrunk down to a very small size, which in turn means that your wealth that you have as a regular-sized person is now multiplied. So you become sort of a millionaire overnight. Yeah. So all these middle-class people decide to downsize and go and live in these small-sized villages. And Matt Damon decides with his wife to go to the one called Leisureland. And that's where the film kind of takes a twist. We're probably going to get into spoilers in this thing, so I guess go see the movie if you haven't, or if you
then
don't,
come back. If you immediately come back and listen to this.
If you don't mind about spoilers, we're just going to go straight in, I think, and talk about the movie in general terms. Yeah, well, actually, one of the biggest spoilers was actually spoiled in the trailer,
which I hated that they did that. Which was a big moment,
which was really odd. Yeah. It kind of distracted because you knew it was coming. Which is Kristen Wiig, who plays Matt Damon's wife. They both. Essentially, they're trying to buy a bigger house, so they decide together to go for the downsizing, but she backs out before she's downsized, and it's an irreversible process. So Matt Damon ends up really small.
And divorced.
And they eventually end up divorcing, as you can imagine, because he's tiny and she's regular-sized. So
It's never going to work.
So Matt Damon's there on his own, and he meets up with Christoph Waltz, who's running sort of a contraband operation, like smuggling in all kinds of alcoholic drinks and cigars.
Yeah.
And obviously, like a large-sized cigar, you can cut that up and make it into lots of small cigars and sell them.
Let's be honest, you just love the fact that everything's tiny in this movie.
Yeah,
it's one of your favourite parts.
To be honest, like I love miniatures. Like I love seeing miniature buildings and miniature models. So this, like, I love model villages. So when you saw it, it was really cool. And one of the things the film did really well was like giving you the impression that they really were that size. Yeah. Like even when it was sort of perspective-wise, you're seeing Matt Damon next to like a car which is like a regular size. You kind of still were.
They did it well. They did the aspect of the miniaturizing well.
Yeah, you were still in the world of like it's really small. You never felt like
here's Matt Damon just next to a regular car.
Yeah, you never felt like I'm having to imagine this. It was like once you've seen him small with like a short sort of hint of perspective. After that, you were sold on the idea that they really were that small. But yeah, the main one of the main things in the film, or one of the main themes through it, is sort of like the ecological message. Because obviously, like at the beginning of the film, there's a brief intro where it's this process invented in Norway, and their idea is like this could help save the environment because tiny people produce a lot less waste.
Yeah.
And the guy comes out with like a
bin bag,
half-full bin bag, and he's like, "This is what waste
we've
produced in a year or something." Yeah. And everyone's like applauding from around the world, and like, "Oh, this is great."
I like to think of this as the ecology borrowers.
Yeah,
that's how I like to think of this movie. But there's loads of themes going on in it because they've got like the class thing and the climate change, and just generally people's reasons for doing it and the happiness. Like the people that were downsizing weren't necessarily doing it for the good of the environment; they were doing it for their own personal gains. Yeah. And some of them were forced into it, as we later find out as well. So it's not all just... To begin with, you're like, downsize... Like, with the first trailer, I thought, downsize is just going to be like a fun, cool idea. But then when you get into it, there's all these themes, and it's quite a...
Yeah, they sold
it. It's quite a sad movie.
They sold it as more of like a funny comedy of like, they're all going to be small people. But then when you watch the film, there's actually a lot of serious issues that they raise throughout it.
You're bringing in like lots of themes, and it's quite a... I came out thinking like, the world's really screwed. And maybe that's what they're going for, because it's a film that makes you think about the way you live and the way you look at the world and the perspectives from different people in the world. Because once Matt Damon's been downsized, his whole world literally changes, and the world is changing around him with climate change and stuff too, and his wife leaving him and all the sacrifices.
Literally changes his perspective.
He literally changes his perspective,
and that's
much bigger.
Yeah, the film is sort of like has a strong political message for the viewers, and I felt like it did it quite well. Like it didn't feel particularly preachy, even though the whole film's focus is sort of telling you we need to save the environment because we're destroying the planet. And there's like a subplot about methane being produced in the Arctic, which is sort of destroying, like causing global warming, destroying the planet. And it's like, how do we stop this? But yeah, one of the interesting things, like you were saying, they introduce a subplot with political refugees, and basically the technology starts being abused by dictators and warlords who start shrinking down their enemies or adversaries against their will. And one of the characters that Matt Damon meets up with, again, you see this in the trailer, is a Vietnamese refugee played by Chau. And her character is really like the emotional heart of the movie for a lot of it. She sort of lost her leg when she was being transported from Vietnam. And all the people she was in sort of a TV box with, a lot of them died. I think she was the only survivor. Yeah. Which is sort of like, oh, that's terrible. But then it also makes you think things like this really do happen in our world, like immigrants and things, and people trying to be smuggled into countries across borders. And a lot of times they do die. So like it really was quite emotional. And her whole backstory is like her village has been destroyed to make way for a dam and flooded. And you feel like, yeah, that really does happen. Yeah. So even though it was sort of, I felt like what was interesting is if you were to tell people these kind of things on the news, they maybe wouldn't listen. But somehow, like, because they've done it in a film and like they're small and they're telling you it, it has sort of more impact maybe. It does. It kind of makes you focus on it, I guess, more.
It does make you think about it. I think that is really what the movie goes for. What I think Alexander Payne was going for was to make people just think about things. Doing it in this different type of movie than it usually does. Like, doing it in a more kind of fun idea way. Yeah. And they do try and, like, interject a lot of humour into it in certain moments. And Not Lang sometimes has those bits trying to lighten it up a little bit. Yeah. And if you don't really like... I'd say if you don't like the way her character's being portrayed, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like the way she was talking and stuff like that.
It's verging on stereotype.
Yeah, it is. She does really go for it. She goes very over the top. But if you don't get bogged down in that, and you don't, I mean, I didn't really. I just thought, I didn't get too bogged down in that. But if you don't get thinking about that too much, then I think it is just a movie that's trying to make you think about things, rather than this jokey thing. But they do try and lighten it, I think, is a point.
I think the thing to say, like, about her character, she does go all out on, like, the stereotype of a Vietnamese immigrant whose English isn't very good, and there's humour to be had there, but they never make her into, like, a joke. You're never laughing at her, and because she has, like, the disability things is played absolutely straight, and her character's played pretty much straight as well, that you're emotionally invested in her. It's not just like, oh, she's a gag character, but she has a funny accent.
Because for me, she's the most interesting character because she has more of a backstory and is more passionate about saving and helping people in the world. Yeah. Whereas Matt Damon is a very bland character. He's always dressed very boringly. His haircut's very boring. He's in really boring jobs. His wife left him. He's a very grey character. He can't really have fun. He doesn't know what his purpose is.
Well, Matt Damon's sort of like a typical sort of middle class guy with a fairly decent job who feels sort of stuck, but he's very self-absorbed in a way. Like, all he's thinking of is, like, they want to move into a bigger house. And like you said, his story is very much moving from being focused on himself to realising there's, like, a bigger world out there and there's people who are suffering a lot more than he's suffering.
I do think like it is also like he's been making sacrifices. He was making sacrifices to start looking after his mum. He made the sacrifice to downsize when he maybe didn't really want to, but he thought that's what his wife wanted, and he thought, it'll be loads of money, it'll solve all our marriage problems. Yeah, and she backed out, and Nok Lang has obviously made lots of sacrifices in her life for her village, losing her leg, being downsized, living in a shanty town. So it's like. But I feel like she's the much more interesting character that keeps it moving along. Yeah. Because if you're just with Matt Damon, I think you'd get a bit...
Well, she sort of has a goal in life, which is, like, to help other people and to help the environment. Like, she's genuinely committed to, like, making things better. Whereas Matt Damon doesn't seem to have that drive, especially once he's downsized. He's kind of, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what I'm for. Yeah. And she's sort of teaching him that, like, to help people. That's like the best thing you can do is like help other people and people who are less fortunate than yourselves.
Who we haven't mentioned is Christoph, Waltz and Udo Kier, who are his neighbour upstairs. And I still can't get over the fact that Matt Damon has like this horrible, terrible flat downstairs. Upstairs, Christoph Waltz had this massive penthouse that must take up the whole top floor of the building. And it just is really ridiculous compared to like Matt Damon. I think it's meant to be like almost like another kind of Clash reference as well.
Yeah.
Because he's upstairs having
there was a lot of Clash stuff. Because the whole thing was sort of Christoph Waltz has vast amounts of money running this somewhat illegal contraband operation.
But nobody cares.
No one cares because they're really small people. So he's saying like, no one cares. It's like one cigarette we're stealing, one cigar. But the whole thing was, I felt it was so odd because even though they've been downsized and sort of money was worth so much more, they still had the same class divide of sort of very wealthy people and very poor people. So it was almost like saying, like a message to our society that, look, there is vast amounts of wealth have been generated by human populations, but it's the fact that it's not distributed evenly. Because like even you could like by minimizing it into the, sort of the Leisureland setting, it kind of made you more aware of the fact that there's easily enough money to make all of these people happy.
Yeah,
but it's just the fact that it's been hoarded by a small group.
There's still people in shanty towns.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, by looking at it in the real world, you maybe ignore it, but when you see it on that scale, it makes it more obvious that there's serious problems with the distribution of wealth. So yeah, overall, I would recommend seeing it. Like, I found it was a fun film. If there was any negatives to it, I would say like sometimes it sort of loses its way a little bit. Like it's throwing a lot of ideas out there. It's very like political and ecological, but the plot sort of meanders through a little bit and doesn't have a like strong focus of where it's going sometimes. But then towards the end, they sort of bring it back and tie everything up, and it makes sense.
Yeah, it would be the same. I really liked the idea. I just thought it was something I haven't seen. Talking about those kind of themes, and it does have a lot of themes, which maybe does make it lose its way a little bit in the end. But I'd rather go and see a film.
It was more
that has lots of themes than
they kind of brought a lot of ideas up, but just sort of left you with them. Like the film didn't necessarily develop them. It was just like, here's another idea that's you might want to think about.
I do think it did have that very ecological message, and I liked that a lot. And I did think that Hong Chau was really good in it. Playing Nok Lang, and Christoph Waltz and Udo Kier were very funny.
Yeah.
And the little moments on screen. But there's only really like 4 really main characters, and Matt Damon was alright, but he was I think he was supposed to be very bland. But maybe that's just him, I don't know. But yeah, overall, I really liked it. It does lose its way a little bit, but I think it's worth going to see. And yeah. So thanks for listening. We'll be back next time. Remember to like and subscribe.